everyone. Welcome to Risk Roundup. We are living in an age of intelligent machines. Now, as artificial intelligence changes our way of life, the increasing ubiquity and rapidly expanding potential of intelligent machines has spurred massive automation-driven transformation of human ecosystem in cyberspace, geospace, and space. From the artificial intelligence-driven transformation of industries to weaponization of artificial intelligence and biased algorithms, the promise and perils of artificial intelligence technology and its applications are raising serious concerns for the future of humanity, prompting calls for regulation of artificial intelligence design, development, and deployment. Now, while fear of disruptive technological transformation, rapid change and calls for the government to regulate new technologies are not new phenomenon. Regulating a technological like artificial intelligence that is transparent, democratized, doesn't require much resources and touches almost every sector of an economy is an entirely new challenge. This is especially complex because most of the risk of artificial intelligence and autonomous systems are unknowns. And unless we identify all potential risks and understand where it originates and make the unknowns known, drafting regulation seems difficult in a timely manner. So how can a technology like artificial intelligence be regulated? To discuss potential paths to effective artificial intelligence regulation and the complex legal and regulatory challenges of artificial intelligence further, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Subhajit Basu to Risk Roundup. Dr. Basu is an associate professor in information technology law, cyberlaw, chair at BILETA, editor IRLCT, School of Law, University of Leeds, based in UK. Welcome, Professor Basu. We are so very honored to have you on Risk Roundup.
Thank you for your invitation. I'm really glad that I will be able to discuss with you a very interesting area, artificial intelligence, and at a time when it is still developing. Yes. We have still time to think about regulation, multiple aspects of it, and perhaps if we think about it now, then probably in future we will be able to develop a regulatory framework of artificial intelligence driven technologies more effectively.
Yes, very true, very true. This is the time to start talking very seriously about how to regulate this. Now, the increasing role of AI, that is artificial intelligence, in the economy and society, it, as we see, it presents both promise and perils and brings practical as well as conceptual challenges for the legal system. So in your assessment, how do you see legal system addressing the rise of artificial intelligence, irrespective of which nation we are talking about?
Well, let me first start with regulating technology. Okay. Now, 20 years, already 5 years ago, when we started thinking about regulating computer and then internet, what we realized at a very early stage is that we do not understand the development of the technology, how the technology behaves. As a result of it, we tried to regulate it in a way which was not very helpful. So you can see that regulation of any technology that has happened over the period of time, initially we always got it wrong. Okay, as a lawyer, I can tell you, most of my colleagues, they do not understand how technology functions. And this is one of the major problems. When you will be able to find a lot of people are talking about regulating artificial intelligence, but they do not always understand what they mean by regulating that artificial intelligence. Where is actually artificial intelligence functioning? Which are the areas artificial intelligence would require regulating? Now, let me give you an example of it. Like a system like, say, Amazon Echo or Google Home, they all use a very soft form of artificial intelligence. Now, everybody talks about, should we regulate Amazon Echo because there are privacy issues around it? Yes, probably we should, but does it require a new legal framework? Do we need to create a new set of rules, new set of laws for something like Amazon Echo? Perhaps not. The same question applies when you have hard form of artificial intelligence when you have got machine learning involved in it. For example, Tesla car. Now, the law which regulates motor vehicle in as such should be able to regulate the driving aspect of it. Okay, but there is a distinction between, suppose a Tesla car gets involved into a road traffic accident. Now, in case of a human being driving a car and getting involved into a road traffic accident, you it is more likelihood that as a law enforcement authority, there is more likelihood that he will be able to pinpoint the negligence, who has been negligent, who has been at fault. When you have artificial intelligence driven car and autonomous vehicle, the question is, so who is at fault here? Is the person who owns the car, the person who developed the technology, created the car? And now even that has got two sides of it. There is a software side of that development, and there is a sort of the hardware, the car side of the development. So who is responsible for what aspect of it? Um, and obviously, can you pinpoint on the owner of the car being negligent? But technically, the owner is not driving the car. But if you want to kind of create a framework, you have to have some form of uh, area to pinpoint the individual who can be made responsible, who can be found as careless. The law as it stands probably will say still the owner of the car being responsible. But my point is, why the owner of the car being responsible? Why not the manufacturer of the car being responsible? Because after all, you are relying on a technology which takes complete control over driving when the vehicle becomes completely autonomous. So the people who created the machine learning, the people who created the algorithm, the people who created this autonomous vehicle should be responsible for it. After all, it is their technology which didn't perform. So understanding this technology is much more important at this point of time before we jump to a point where we try to regulate it. Okay, and
Absolutely. I agree with you in that. In an initial point that you made that, not many people understand in the legal judicial community that what is AI and what are these emerging technologies and how to regulate them, because there is not enough understanding of what it exactly, how it changes the whole landscape and where, the risk originates. So that
yeah,
is a very true point you made. And about the autonomous car that you said, you are absolutely right, because even if I own a Tesla or any autonomous car, and if that gets into an accident, am I responsible for that? I cannot be responsible, because I have left the decision to the algorithm or
yeah,
to the autonomous car to drive
absolutely.
the way it sounds, it seems fit. And now, if the where is the risk originating? The risk doesn't originate with me just because I bought a autonomous car.
Yeah.
The risk originates with the algorithm, whoever has defined and designed the algorithm. So your point is absolutely correct and right on, that the risk originates with manufacturer. And that just the same way we are talking about AI, the many other technologies in this information age should be addressed, because it is the people who design, who the creators of the any information system or any AI system, that are responsible for any damage happening because of it. Because a common man doesn't know how to modify this algorithm, or whether they should modify, or how to protect themselves. They cannot protect themselves.
And also, the government doesn't even know, because a lot of this AI driven technology will be black box. Okay. We won't even know what is actually going on inside it. Now, if you read a work of like Victor Meyer Schonenberg, he wrote a book about big data and artificial intelligence, mostly about big data's context. And he said, look, so far we can un- unwrap the software, the algorithms, to understand how they were all put together, how a particular thing functions. When it becomes completely artificial intelligence driven, the whole area will be completely unknown. We won't be able to unpack what led to this point. We won't know. How did the mission decide in a certain manner? We won't know. The development of the technology is happening in such a way that after some time, we can't actually say that this is the reason why the particular technology didn't function or did function in a particular manner. So it is not always be easy for a common user even to predict, how will this car behave. You may think, okay, there is an obstacle in front of me, the car should stop, because your expectation is the car will must have been taught to stop. And I'm involved in a research with Institute of Transport Studies in University of Leeds. We are trying to understand. Um, we are basically trying to teach the machine that if you do not stop, you will hit. Now, to do it with a fixed obstacle, it is easy. The car will learn very, very quickly. Car or whatever autonomous body will learn very, very quickly. But when there is a human interaction in it, and human being, the psychology of the human being is we do cross the road even though we see there is a red man. So how do you teach the car to understand the human psychology? How do you teach the technology, the algorithms to understand human technology? Because humans are not always predictable.
Very true. Very true. That is an excellent point. That how do we translate how we operate into these autonomous machines? But even if we translate how we operate in autonomous machines, is that going to bring the safety and security? Because, like you said, we are highly unpredictable, species. We just don't know when we will take the right decision, wrong decisions, and it's a very complex. And if we try to uh, train the autonomous systems like how we do things, then also we have very complex challenges emerging. So what it looks like that even if any nation or any state wants to regulate AI, they need to examine legal scholarship. Do you
Yes.
think we have enough sufficient legal scholarship that can give us a firm foundation to the much needed regulatory landscape for AI? Because as I see, we have just started talking about these things
We
and
we
intelligently.
we have just at the kind of the tip of this iceberg, because we have spent last 20 years trying to understand how we can regulate cyberspace, how we can regulate internet. And as time passes, we have realized that probably the way we wanted to regulate it has not been possible. Artificial intelligence. Now, people have been talking about artificial intelligence for probably last 50 years. Okay, I mean, even Alan Turing's computer, that was thinking behind it was artificial intelligence, but it never really picked up. It has picked up in, say, last 10 years. Okay, now there are very few academics, legal academics around the world who have started thinking about it or writing about it. That is one side of it. The other side of it, this is a field where science is the driving force. Okay, and I give you an example, because I do happen to work with the scientists. Is they always think regulation as an afterthought. So when they start doing a research or they start putting a research funding application, the law comes last because they think that we, the lawyers, are hindrance to the innovation. Okay, so less we get involved, better for them. And that is an argument that have been trying to make all the time. That if you involve legal practitioners or legal academics at an early stage of the innovation, where I understand innovating the technology is far more important for you as a scientist, then perhaps we can tell you the perils at an earlier stage. We can tell you that, look, there is a privacy issue here. Look, there is a liability issue here. Look, there is a question of surveillance here. There is a group in New York. They are called AI Now. It's funded by Microsoft and quite a few of academics from, I think, New York University. They have created this center, this research center at the moment, to look into AI, regulation of AI, to look into to understand AI. But even then, they only managed to publish a report towards the end of last year, and still people are talking about at a very superficial level. Um, yes, there is an argument that there should be regulation of artificial intelligence. Everybody is arguing that the regulation should be sector specific. Okay, cannot be a kind of a blanket argument. Regulation is not possible. European Union has recently published a report, and it's talked about a code of ethics. Okay, my argument is if you want to regulate it, I don't want it to be regulated now. I just want it to be people thinking about regulation now so that we understand it. My argument is a simple code of ethics will not work. We need far more regulation. Maybe in 3, 4, 5 years' time, once we understand this technology much more better, but we need it. One aspect I think we should seriously think about regulation now is the area of surveillance. And there are governments in the world who are using artificial intelligence to do profiling, to do facial recognition, and they are using it in a number of areas. Yeah, there have been backlashes. Big tech companies, their employees have responded quite vigorously against this tech companies getting involved into artificial intelligence driven surveillance projects or military projects. For example, I know Google. Google wanted to get involved into it for a military purpose, and Google employees were not happy about it. So they did come out of it. Saying that, we know there are experiments going on, there are projects going on in China uh, where artificial intelligence is being used for surveillance purpose. Um, the other aspect is artificial intelligence. When we have got things, so there are liability issues from this, like cars or a robot doing a surgery. But it's all about data. So one aspect of artificial intelligence can be regulated by having clearer data protection law. Now, data protection law in Europe, what we have, United States doesn't have a data protection law as such. In UK, we have the GDPR, our latest data protection law. It talks about regulating. It doesn't talk about regulating artificial intelligence, but it talks about that there will not be a profiling of individuals, completely autonomous profiling of individuals without uh, human interference or without human involvement. So we have to kind of divide uh, the use of artificial intelligence into different blocks and then think about, okay, how can I regulate use of artificial intelligence on the grounds that it is not used to discriminate people? Okay, how can I regulate artificial where artificial intelligence is used to do for medical purposes? Okay, you create a robot which does operations, and then autonomous vehicles. Now, the two most areas where we are concerned outside the surveillance is where artificial intelligence driven robots are being used for surgery, for medical purposes. Now, people argue that, well, medical fraternity is itself is a quite adequately regulated world. So, do we really need to think about further regulation at this point of time? Particularly, do we need to think about regulation at a time where the innovation hasn't taken place or progressed? Now, there were experiments carried out. I don't remember in which country. I think either in Canada or in US, where surgery was performed by humans and robots, and in about 60% of the cases, surgery the surgery carried out by the robots were better than the human. They were faster, better, and in 40% of the cases, the robots needed human intervention. Now the question is, do we create a specific law which regulates the robot surgeon? No point. My point is, what do you regulate? You can't. It's a robot at the end of the day. It's actually the company which manufactures the robot should be responsible. Now, this is all risk assessment. Okay, how much risk are we willing to take? I mean, we as human beings, if I'm a doctor and I perform a surgery, there is always a risk that that surgery can go wrong. But when that surgery is done by a robot, are we happy to tolerate 1% risk, 0.1% risk, 5% risk?
Yes.
How do you judge that?
Yes.
Okay, you don't judge a surgeon's record. Okay, this surgeon has done 100 surgeries and was 95% of the time he was perfect. Okay, and then go and approach the doctor. You don't do it. We don't do it. So if you create a law which is compatible with the person you're replacing, it becomes very difficult, because if you have a robot, the expectation would be that the robot will be 100% correct all the time, every time. Is that a possibility? After all, it's a machine which has learned based on how it has been taught.
Yes.
If
Yes.
there is a fault in that teaching,
Yes.
you know,
That is an excellent point, because the how robot functions will be based on how he has learned and what data is used to learn. So you are right that there is the expectation to regulate, like to expect them to be 100% correct, or that we want no risk. That is probably not going to be possible. And in also that the traditional method of regulation that we are used to, such as like research and development oversight, or licensing products, or tolerability, they all seem quite not right fit to manage the risk associated with these autonomous machines, because the risk originates probably at individual level, at a industry level, at a system national level, on at a system level, and there are many complex challenges emerging. So unless we identify all these potential risks and make the unknowns known, drafting regulations seems very, very difficult. And there is another point, that this research and development of AI is not visible. We just
no.
don't know. It is democratized. We don't know how many people in the world are working on developing AI systems, and the AI doesn't require any kind of infrastructure. All you need is a computer, and you need to be knowledgeable about the any language that you want to use to develop the artificial intelligence, and you need data. There's plenty of public data available, so systems can be developed. So when anyone in any part of the world could be computing and need only computer and data, there is no way for regulators to be able to find out who is working on AI and what
Mhm.
systems are being developed. So as the research and development for artificial intelligence is democratized and decentralized, how would we even be able to regulate any of these activities? Because the risk originate at the development phase. So how are we going to regulate that?
And that is a very good point you have made. That the risk actually originates at the development point. Okay, and the people who are involved in development of them are much more knowledgeable in this respect. And for a regulator's point of view, it is extremely unlikely that we will know those risks in the first place, unless there is a form of collaboration. Okay, and there is an exchange of knowledge, that look, these are the risks which we have found, there are possibilities. Okay, um, and then we can think about ways to regulate it, then we can find a ways to ensure that we minimize that risk from a legal point of view. We can mitigate that from a legal point of view, but the solution needs to be technological. The solution has to be technological. Okay, the other aspect is a lot of these AI driven projects are secret projects. Okay, there is work going on cancer which is AI driven, uh, which I understand. There is work going on, a lot of military grade. surveillance technologies that are they're AI driven, and they are secret projects. There are work going on. We cannot say it very clearly, but there is an understanding that Amazon and Google is involved using AI to monitor consumer behavior, so that in future the advertisements will be much more personalized, much more targeted. Um, so there are different, so it's not one particular area where artificial intelligence is used, or one particular company which is using artificial intelligence. Our future life, probably we will have the whole day where every small aspect of our life will have got some connection to artificial intelligence, where artificial intelligence has got a connection. Now we know that some of the US courts are using artificial intelligence at a disclosure level to understand, what are the document that needs disclosing as a part of it. And we know that in criminal justice system, artificial intelligence is being used, but it is not used to replace it, but as a supplement to it. Again, unless we know how robust the system is, we know they are not foolproof, because there have been examples where profiling has been done, so a person can has been found guilty based on the profile he has. Okay, now in case of criminal justice system, where the human element is, you make your judgment based on facts and law, what is in front of you, and there is a sense of unpredictability in it. Okay, machine doesn't do unpredictability. Okay, it has a sort of a yes or no. So if I've got 100 things in front of me, and if 70% of it goes a certain way, the machine will say that is the chance that he has been guilty. Now there can be 100 of different other factors which could have led to that 70%, which only a human being can understand, but not a robot can understand, or artificial intelligence driven system cannot understand. I mean, robot beings probably a bit too far fetched, but artificial intelligence driven system can understand. So my point is that we are using all this, AI driven system in different areas, but we have to appreciate the limitations that come with it. Okay, and when we are thinking about regulating it, we need to understand what we are trying to regulate and at what level. Now, it is easier to say there should be a human oversight, but as I said you at the very beginning, human oversight will not work the way the technology is developing, because of the black box system. Because we won't know why this is behaving in a certain manner. So we need to create layers within the technology, so that it comes to a point that the technology can correct itself. Now, I don't know most of the technologies which where artificial intelligence is used, whether they have something like that in place or not at this point of time.
Yes, very true. It is that information is not available easily. Now, there is also, I mean, the bigger challenge, and I think that is at the root of, lot of other complex issues that we are seeing in regulating artificial intelligence is what exactly is artificial intelligence? I mean, how do we define artificial
Yeah.
intelligence? Because there is so much ambiguity around even the word intelligence. So it seems that the difficulty in defining artificial intelligence is perhaps not in the concept of artificiality, but rather in this conceptual ambiguity of artificial, I mean, the intelligence itself, the word, because how do we define, like, what kind of computational procedures we want to call intelligence? How do we come up with that, understanding? So, is there any development happening in that area, or there is a common language in how to define and how to understand what exactly is artificial intelligence, or what kind of systems or procedures or algorithms that are being developed can be called intelligent?
Well, it's a very interesting thing, and I'm glad you raised it. How do we define artificial intelligence? Now, scientists will give you a definition of artificial intelligence. This technology will make sure that this particular, say, device can perform on its own. So after some time, it can replace the human being, and then it can, well, technically it can decide its next step based on the information it already has in its hard drive or in its memory. But that is a scientific definition. Okay, from a lawyer's point of view, how do we define what is artificial intelligence is a challenge, and there is no unanimous definition of artificial intelligence from a legal point of view. I know a couple of people have tried to write it. I think Professor Amit Ziani has tried to write from a legal psychological point of view. He tried to define what he means and understands by artificial intelligence. But even in his own writing, I think he published a kind of a short blog sort of thing last year. He said that this is my understanding of that artificial intelligence. I'm not saying that this is how the definition of artificial intelligence should look like. And you're absolutely right. I mean, how do we define intelligence? Okay, and then we kind of think about artificial intelligence, defining artificial intelligence.
Right.
Um, yes, that is. I
I,
think if you are to start, you have to start there.
I hear you on that, and I mean, it's not like the machines that automate. We have had them for a long time. It's the machines that are used for automation are not new, but the machines that work to achieve goals. So it appears that the current approach to defining artificial intelligence, they are focusing on the concept of machines that work to achieve goals, but machines have been working to achieve goals for a long time. So from a regulatory perspective, how the goal oriented approach makes sense, and how can we define AI through the lens of goals to provide working definitions for AI for regulatory purposes, because machines have been working to achieve the goals for a long time.
And this is the thing, we have to change our focus, because if you focus just on the goals, then a machine doing a repetitive task, it's been here for ages, since the industrial revolution. So you know goal oriented, task oriented machine, that is not how we need to understand AI. The proper use of AI has to be where that that car, or that the one which does operation, the robot which does the operation, it's it can think. So the thinking is, when things go wrong, it can correct itself, and then you can understand that actually that machine has got that thinking ability. If you give a machine a task which it can repeat 100 times, 200 times the same thing over and over again, that is not artificial intelligence. But if you give that machine the task where it will require to maybe you know deviate from what it has been taught in the first place, then you can say, look, this machine has got the ability to perform a task like a human being. It's in human nature to correct your course. Even if you look at the satellites or whatever, whenever we send something outside, where extremely sophisticated science, some cases it can correct its course, but in most of the cases there will be a command which has been sent to correct its course. In a completely artificial intelligence driven world, we do not have to send that command. Okay, the machine itself will realize that I am deviating from what I'm supposed to do. Okay, and this is where I told you, gave you the example of a car and a human being. Okay, if I the the car needs to think that this human being can cross the road because there is an unpredictability in it. So I have to either slow down or stop, because the car will think, because there is a green light, I can go, because it's kind of a binary thinking. The car would think, why would that man cross the road when I have a green and he or she has a red light? No, the car needs to think, although I have a green and this person is trying to cross the road, there is a possibility that he or she may come in front of me, and I just hit him or her. So my course of action would be to reduce the speed. And that is the way I understand a full functioning artificial intelligence, that it can rectify itself, it can correct itself, it can behave like a human being, it can outperform itself. And a lot of artificial intelligence driven products, for example, are in that learning phase. So they are learning to outperform itself what it was like yesterday. A
Yes,
very simple form of your is this Amazon eco driven product. So Amazon always keeps on telling that if you are concerned about your privacy, then you have to understand your device will not perform as its capability. It has the capability to do it. The reason being, the information you give to that device makes that device much more intelligent and understand you much better. And this is the problem where data protection and privacy comes in. In this innovation driven world, which is driven by data, it's all about information. Every element collects information, and it's collecting information about you, me, and everybody else.
sure.
Is
Sure,
are we willing to lose a bit of privacy
sure.
to
No,
make it intelligent?
I agree. I agree. Privacy, I mean, the way we were used to being, having the privacy, that will not survive, or that will not work in this new age. But at the same time, as even these Amazon echoes and all these other systems that are out there, as they collect the data, as because like you said, they keep learning, they keep making themselves better by learning,
Mm.
from the interactions. Now, if those what they learned, and then if that learning is used to harm any individual or even human society, then that is something that the risk, goes back to the manufacturer or the Amazon, who has developed the Amazon Echo. So those kind of things we'll have to think about, because so far the legal community has been used to intervening only after harm has occurred. But here we are, in a whole different area where we have to start thinking about all these legal challenges or the security problems that can emerge even before the harm has occurred. And the it seems that the most obvious feature of this artificial intelligence that separates it from the earlier technologies is its ability to act autonomously. So as they keep learning, and they interact with the human beings or their ecosystem, they keep learning on themselves, and then at that point even the manufacturer or the developer of the algorithm will have no control over it, because their role is over. The earlier, they defined the algorithm, but now the algorithm is making modifications on its own. So how
Yes.
the act of autonomous feature complicate regulating AI, because at that point even humans will have no control.
No, I mean the AI will have sort of say social challenges. Okay, it will have legal challenges, but my point of view is the AI's social challenges and legal challenges are interconnected. Okay, now if you teach an AI in a way that it learns to discriminate, then whatever that AI will do, the AI driven object will do, it will keep on discriminating. So the question is it is at the learning phase where we have to focus on. Okay, and if we focus on the learning phase of the AI, then we will be able to mitigate some of the risk. Okay, and then we can think about regulating uh, at a level where it is easier for us to regulate. So
Yeah, but see that's we are going to face a lot of challenges, because the development of AI, it's democratized and decentralized. So
yeah,
at developing any particular system, there could be like 100 people working from all different parts of the world. Now,
absolutely.
each of these, in how do we because each of these countries' regulatory environment is different, and the sheer number of individuals and firms that can participate in the design or modification or incorporation of any AI system component, it's going to make it so difficult to identify who is responsible for the security risk that emerges from that.
I think you said of quite an interesting thing. We do we do not have a unanimous legal framework around the world. Different country has got its different priorities. Now, if I even the European within the European Union, if we try to regulate it, probably we will have some sort of, as the European Union said in the last report, that there should be an ethical guidelines on development of AI-driven things. European doesn't want to be seen as anti-innovation. Okay, so that is the European state. European position. On the other hand, if you look at the United States position, some of the states are actually actively thinking about regulating AI-driven devices. China, it doesn't even want to think about. We don't even know how much research is going on AI related area in China and whether it actually ever wants to regulate it. So it's going to be extremely difficult at a global level to think about a regulatory framework or a legal framework which will have a global application or global consensus. It We will never achieve it. It's like regulating speech and regulating privacy.
Yes, I hear you on that. But see, the challenge is I see that there is a lot of focus on ethics, which is good, but there should be more focus on the security, because the challenges that will emerge from the AI algorithmic autonomous systems, that could also impact the future of humanity. It brings existential risk for the
Yes.
security of the humanity. So I think we have to, while we are, it's good that we are focusing on ethics, but I think security needs to be at the top of anyone's framework. That how do we make sure that any of these algorithms that are being developed, any of these systems that are being developed, autonomous systems, that we define or we figure out how to regulate those systems, because based on the security challenges that emerges from this, ethics and all that, which is fine, but security is what is going to protect the future of humanity. So I don't see that anybody talking about that. And it's like you said, China, we have no idea what's going on there. They are developing so many systems, and they are not only putting their nations perhaps at risk, but also, if they don't have the proper foundation and framework, they are creating a lot of security risk, not only for their country but for the future of humanity. So we'll have to look into that. But all nations, they have to come together as far as regulating AI goes, because it is about not only the security of any individual or any individual nation, it is about the security of the future of humanity. So what challenges do you see if we
I'm
do?
I completely agree with you. I mean, a couple of years, not 3 years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, Stephen Hawking's wrote an open letter, and there were about 2,000 signatories in that letter, including Elon Marx and others. And they all, and recently, actually, last year, Elon Marx actually talked about regulating artificial intelligence, and he actually mentioned that it could be a threat. It is the next threat to the humankind. Um, and Stephen Hawking's argument was same, that unless we try to think about how to regulate this, once it kind of starts to really reach a stage where it can develop on its own, it will be too late to regulate it. The other important point you raise is about security, because it's a security and trust. Those are two related things. At the end of the day, all these companies which are developing artificial intelligence driven devices, they want us to use it. We will not be able to have trust in those systems unless we know those systems are secure. Okay, those systems are meant to would perform in a way they are meant to perform, and this is where I see the challenge. Now, you can providing a legal framework which assures security is a step, okay? But providing a technological framework which assures security is probably the best way forward. If you look at the European law on data protection, it talks about privacy by design. Now, my point is, if you want to think about ensuring security in artificial intelligence driven systems, the sense of security should come from the technology which designed it. So we have to think about it at the stage of conception. Okay, or maybe at a point of execution, at a stage where it can be executed. But it has to be thought at the level, at the scientific level. It cannot be an afterthought.
No,
Only then,
absolutely.
only then we will be we the issues that you raised, we will be able to counter them. Okay,
No,
we
no, I
can.
agree on that because see, privacy by design. I mean, there's a lot of focus on privacy, which is good. We do need to focus on that, but security is way more important than privacy, I would say. So, but the challenge is that when we came up with all these computers and internet, or when we started connecting all the computers to the internet, so at that time also, we left it to all the individuals that they will figure out security themselves. Now most of the individuals, they don't know how to secure themselves, or what kind of antivirus programs they need to download, or how to make sure that their computer is safe, or how to make sure that their smartphone is safe, or what to do, what not to do. Common man doesn't know that. Most of the people, they don't know that. Even the ones that are knowledgeable about all these security issues, they are also not in a position to protect themselves effectively, because of all these emerging cyber threats that are coming to them, and the new, all innovative ways of hacking, and all these different malwares and everything that is emerging. So common men cannot secure themselves. So to expect that a common man will be able to secure in the age of AI is probably naive to think that Commonwealth will be able to do it. So the responsibility and accountability goes to the people who design, whether it's an
Yeah.
individual, whether it's in a group or a company or a government. The responsibility lies to them. So how do we make sure that we make them accountable for developing algorithms that could, or create a bigger risk for the security of the humanity? And all these governments and institutions and all these organizations, they keep talking about the guidelines, they keep talking about the privacy issue. Nobody is talking about the security, and which is very disappointing, that where focus needs to be. Yes, guidelines are good, ethics are good, privacy is good, but security is fundamental. You need to talk about that first. So I think there is a need for new institutions that can deal with these issues that are emerging from artificial intelligence and the security for the future of humanity.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm not sure how far we can go at this point of time in terms of creating an institution which will oversee the development of it. But one thing is definite, that security needs to come at the forefront of it. One. The other thing is transparency. This company needs to be much more transparent. It needs to explain to us how they perform, okay, how they work, how the technology, how the algorithms develop, based on what. Now, whether they will be happy to do such without a legal oversight is questionable. But all these tech companies, these giant tech companies, at least they are in a phase where they are much more receptive. They are listening. They are understanding that unless we proactively participate in this discussion, it is not a question of whether artificial intelligence driven systems should be regulated or not. It is a question of when. It's not if, it's a when. Okay. And that is they understand very, very clearly. And security element of it is a part of that whole thinking. Okay. And my view on this is very much that it is about making these companies much more responsible, rather than us users being more proactive in that sense, because these companies have got more understanding of this technology, how they perform, how they function, and particularly what are the threats they pose, more than any one of us we will ever do,
Yes,
or
no,
will ever know.
very true, because as users, we have no control over how any
Yep.
of the AI system is going to function. But it is the developers, irrespective of the developer is an individual or a
Yep.
group or organizations or companies or governments. It is their responsibility. But the challenge is that they are all working in silos, and there is
Yep.
not any dialogue, that collaborative collective discussion is not going on to see how to protect the systems, and everybody is in rush to come up with an algorithm that does something, and they want to commercialize it, they want to make money out of it, which is good. The business, the incentive of profit making is good, but when the security risk that can emerge from any of those algorithms, once it becomes autonomous and once it starts, then there is, we cannot at that point control, or we cannot secure ourselves. So there are a lot of complex challenges here, because I just I see a lot of security risk emerging from the way this development is happening from all across nation, as this is all democratized, and nobody is in control and nobody is accountable. So there are many security risks coming, and that's going to be a really interesting headache for the legal
Yeah,
engine.
yeah, and I think one way would be we should think about developing sort of commercial codes for this artificial intelligence companies. We have to make these companies much more accountable than what they are or what they used to be. Give me for an example. Something we are talking about quite a lot nowadays about accountability of the social media. Okay, now when these social media companies were developing, we always thought, okay, how much harm can it do? But just yesterday there was an interview with the chairman of Instagram on BBC, and he has acknowledged and realized that Instagram has a responsibility about removing self-harm images from its account, from user accounts, because at the end of the day, it is a service provider, and it has to be a ethical service provider. They cannot wash their hands, say that look, the law is there, okay, and it's the responsibility of the law enforcement authorities to ensure the materials which are not acceptable to be removed, or the parents' responsibility to protect their children, or you as an individual, you should have a responsibility to protect yourself. But it is also the responsibilities of these companies, okay, to perform, to function in a way which is much more conducive, much more helpful for the society. The same argument goes for these artificial intelligence-driven companies, that we have made a mistake in terms of thinking how the social media company, how big they are, how powerful they are. 10 years ago, nobody thought that Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat can be as powerful as, or Instagram can be as powerful as anything else or nothing we have ever seen in the world. These mediums can manipulate elections. These mediums can turn a completely domicile, peace-loving country into a situation of complete chaos or war. The same argument goes into this artificial intelligence. Yes, it is at an inception stage, a conception stage in most of the cases, but we have to foresee the argument you are making about security aspect. We have to foresee that there are possibilities like this, and one way would be to have sort of commercial codes, okay, that these kind of do's and don'ts, okay, even if we cannot, which I said that probably a complete legal framework is the way forward, but if we can't reach that point, at this point we should have at least some sort of codes, okay,
Yeah.
and this should be over and above the ethical code which European Union is talking about. And I think that is the way forward, and through that we will be able to address some of the issues. One thing you didn't touch upon is all of this artificial intelligence company, they work secretly because in order to protect their intellectual property,
Yeah.
and intellectual property, protecting it, they make money. And a lot of it is they are involved in the creative industry also. So for them to come up with something, a system, I mean we talk about complete transparency, and a lot of academics are talking about complete transparency in this particular area, but how much transparency is commercially possible
Mm.
is a question, because these companies would try to protect their intellectual property, and it is not too difficult once you understand how a particular device is developed to copy it. And
Sure.
this is why they will, because we have seen from the mobile industry that it is yes, you can be a market trendsetter, you can bring the innovation in the market, but it doesn't take too much of time to copy that innovation, and then that is a problem. And this is probably one of the reasons these companies are not so open about transparency.
No, that is a complex challenge because everybody is trying to protect their intellectual property, which is understandable. But when this intellectual property could, put the security of future of humanity at risk, then that is something that needs to be handled in a different way. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how exactly. I have not put together my thoughts on how we can go forward. But for example, there could be an industry audit committee who can elect the people that they trust, and
Yeah.
those people can go through any algorithm that is going to be used for a system in a very confidential manner, so that it cannot be copied or it cannot go to any other organization. But that should be some sort of audit function to that, or someone who can certify that yes, this algorithmic system that is developed, it's certified, and at this point it doesn't pose any risk to the future of humanity. And but that audit or that certification needs to be ongoing. One time certification won't work because these algorithms will be improving themselves. So
There has to be adequate governance. There
yes,
has to be an oversight mechanism, but most importantly, there has to be accountability in
yes,
this areas, and that is I think is the most important thing. There has to be accountability,
yes,
and unless we reach that point, yeah, you're absolutely right. I can't foresee how it should be done at this point of time. How you ensure this whole security measures that can be applied or created, but at this point of time, my biggest concern is not having accountability in this in this whole domain of artificial intelligence driven devices, or artificial intelligence driven world, and that worries me because we don't seem to learn from our history. We don't really learn from our past mistakes, uh, but AI is a thing. It's like, it's like a toothpaste. You press it, it is out. You can't put it in.
yes,
And that is the thing which people can't seem to understand. That look, once you have this thing, this machine learning, systems in place, there is no going back.
very true.
There is no going back.
That is not going back. Very, very true. So, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners as to what we should be doing, or as to even the complex challenges that we are facing? I mean, you summarized it quite well, but where would you like to see the development happening, and what areas we need, the legal and judicial community should focus on as we, move forward in the more and more systems emerging in the world of artificial intelligence. So, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners?
Well, my point is, first is we should not create a regulation for the sake of creating a regulation.
True.
Okay, we need to understand how the technology works, how the technology is developing, and which way it will go in future, and then we should think about the regulatory framework. We should think about creating a regulatory framework which may be sector specific. So we need to understand where the artificial intelligence are being used, and then try to understand whether we have existing law, are they adequate to regulate it. If they're not, then we should seriously think about amending the existing law. The next important issue is we should not create a regulatory framework, which is my understanding, my interaction with the scientists is, we should not create a regulatory framework which hinders innovation. And this is the biggest threat the scientist feels from us as lawyers, okay? That you create hindrance, you do not let the innovation progress, okay? So there has to be a dialogue. It has to be a kind of a three-way dialogue. So the governments with the scientific communities, the people, computer scientists who are developing this thing, and legal enforcers, legal practitioners, academics. It's a three-way dialogue where the government creates a policy which promotes innovation, but which also ensures accountability and transparency. Where the scientist creates the technology, which appreciates that there could be a need for further regulation, which is actually in favor of that innovation, okay, which will ensure that this innovation is used for the purpose it was designed to be. We cannot predict that our technology will never be used for negative purposes, but we at least can try and minimize that risk. Okay, so there has to be a dialogue between the policymakers, the inventors, or the technology developers or software developers, and the legal fraternity. And only then we will be able to create, maybe in few years' time, a framework which is deliverable, which is enforceable. Okay, no matter, we can create as many legislations as we want in every sector we can think of, but at the end of the day, it is the enforceability of that legislation that is the most important. That brings the system of control. And in this particular case, that same principle applies. Let's see how the technology develops, okay? But let's, at this point of time, start thinking about it. Thinking about the security issues, thinking about the discrimination issues, thinking about where a consumer can be manipulated by this. These are issues on their own. They may seem like not that important, not that big, but if you put them all together, it becomes quite a big problem, quite a big challenge. And it is a challenge. And that is something we have to accept and understand, that we are facing a challenge we have never faced before. If we think internet has revolutionized our world, you have not seen anything what
Very,
artificial intelligence can do.
very true, very true. And I agree with you that there needs to be a beginning of dialogue between government, developers, and legal community. But I also think security community needs to be part of that.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So without understanding where the security risk, emerges, we cannot effectively legislate. So thank you so much, Professor Basu, for participating in Risk Roundup today.
Thank you, Subhajit. Thank you.
We
Thank you
appreciate
for having me. Thank you.
So we appreciate your thoughtful insight on regulating artificial intelligence, and our global viewers and listeners will benefit tremendously from the information you shared today. So even if one decision maker or one regulatory agency can understand how to or how not to regulate, this risk roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that. So, Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence and transformation happening across cyberspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they all walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. It is not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security. So if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the Risk Roundups, to watch the Risk Roundup webcast or hear the Risk Roundup podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.